Hello and welcome to The Right Side Up with me, Danielle Strickland.
And with me, James Scholl. We're doing it, and it's just the two of us now. Often
yes,
we have really interesting guests who are fascinating.
Very excited about a new season that we are launching right now.
But we're also fascinating. Danielle is very fascinating, and I'm also really happy to be here. So, you know, with the two of us combined, it's going to be wonderful.
What are we calling this series, James?
We are calling this series also known as Danielle. And
which short form is AKA.
AKA. This had an acronym long before other things had an acronym. It's like one of the early acronyms, I feel. So we're keeping it real. And this kind of came from this idea I had when talking to a very smart friend of mine, Charlotte, who's been on podcast before. And she got
shout out to Charlotte.
Shout out to Charlotte. It gets very irritated. She's like, the subheadings in the Bibles are just wrong a lot of the time. They focus on the wrong thing, and they take our eye away from the thing that sometimes the text is actually about. Now, the most, I think, famous example of this might be the parable of the prodigal son. And of course, we love that story. One of the best parts of all the Bible, if we're allowed to have favorites. But it really focuses on just one character in that story. And the version that I like to tell is the parable of the loving father and his two lost sons. So whilst we do focus on that prodigal who went away and felt bad and came back, there's also another son in that story, and we get to see how the father responds to him as well. And so, but when we only think the parable of the prodigal son, we cut off the second half of the text and we miss things. And so I was thinking, well, how often do we do that in the Bible? And the answer is all the time. Yeah. I feel like I miss the point. I don't know. Do you have any examples of this, Danielle? Is this something you've been thinking about since we've been talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it raises a lot of things in terms of, like, you know, we've both, if you've grown up in the church or you've been, you know, sort of part of the Western church for a long time, we've kind of been conditioned to read the Bible a certain way. And so I feel like I've had several sort of metanoias or, you know, mind shifts in this regard. One, of course, is like, I remember the first time somebody said to me, like, when you read the Exodus, you know, why are you identifying with the Israelites? You should be identifying with the Egyptians, you know? And then I was like, what? And that like completely changes the way that you read the Exodus. And then I had
then you like wrote a
time
book
when I was
off the basis of that, like you was
right. And so partly like that's like and whether or not we know it or not, we've been formed in a way that we read the Bible a certain way. And then even like Charlotte pointed out, and that you've sort of run with, is this idea that like even the way the Bible is framed, you know, this is one of the things that I think the Message really highlighted, because Eugene Peterson refused to put verses in, right? Like just refused to sort of code it accordingly. And it just was like, what? Is that allowed? Like, you know, we're so used to using it like a textbook. And then actually not only is that allowed, that's the original way the Bible was written. Like a letter is not divided up into like sections and with headings and numbers and all that kind of stuff. It just was a way of making it easier for us to resource. But as a effect of that, whether it was meant to or not, it drives the way we see the text or hear the text. Like just like you said, the prodigal son. So then we're reading that story, that's what we're focused on. But maybe there's more to that story than just that one focus. But the chapter headings have, you know, and again, the one that really ticks me off is where it's like, wives, submit to your husband, because they literally chapter title it after the paragraph before it that says we should be submitted to one another. Yeah. And then the like, wives, submit to your husband is one of the examples of how we submit to one another, but they've separated that by a chapter heading, which drives me crazy. And I want to find that person who made that the separation and not the 3 verses ahead.
Well,
that actually,
I've got some good news for you.
Tell me, James, how did that happen? Who did that? Who did the chapter titles and separations?
Are you ready for some history, Danielle? I love history.
Tell me, help me understand. It definitely was a man. It was a man for sure.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay, that's Well, you're right. It's always a man. That's fair. I'm gonna take us back. I'm gonna take us back 2,000 years, and you will love history by the end of this. I'm gonna cram 2,000 years of history into about like 3 minutes here. So bear with me.
Yeah, that's the way I love it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. It's just all of it. So So when our Bibles were first written, when people were writing in Greek, nearly always for the New Testament, everything was written in block capitals. So block capitals, and you didn't like end words at the end of a line. You just kept on writing letters.
Yeah, no punctuation.
No punctuation, nothing like that. So you would break off a word halfway through a word to get to the next line. So you'd have that kind of the classic example is God is nowhere or God is now here. And they would be written exactly the same and all in block capitals, or even they could be written God is nowhere. It's really difficult. So this is why translation is kind of tricky. Even my favorite example of this is it abundance or is it abundance? Because I think abundance sounds like a fun thing to go to, but they've been written the same. So that's just how stuff was written for centuries and centuries and centuries.
And that's like we're talking about scrolls. Is that why?
Yeah. So it's just you didn't want to waste any space on it.
You're
and
using all the space.
How it was done, right? Like that's that's how people write. That's people have been writing for centuries. Why would we do it any differently? Around 700 AD, so quite a long time after this, some English folks, I'm delighted to say, they went, you know what? Maybe it would be easier if we had line breaks for different words. Like just imagine that. Like you don't finish a line halfway through a word. We're gonna break that. And then about a century after that, other Bible manuscripts are kind of following suit. It's not until the 12th century of Christianity, so that's 60% of the way from Jesus to now, the Archbishop of York, again, English people just throwing their weight around, obviously, decided...
They love their grammar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're welcome. Decided to add chapters to the Bible. So chapters weren't in the Bible for so much of history. I think this stuff is really, really fascinating. And then it's about another 300 years until we get verses. So it's not until like the 1600s that there's a French printer named Robert Estienne introduced this thing that would blow our minds, which was verse numbers. So before, if you wanted to say, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, it would be like, well, to quote John, the beginning, and then like after 1200 years, like to try John 3, the middle. But now we're like, no, we have verses, and it's very, very exciting. There are a couple of reasons for this, actually.
James, this is actually really funny because I don't actually like when I'm preaching, I don't like giving chapter and verses because I feel like it makes it sound like a lecture.
Yeah.
So I'll just say like, as John said, or as John discovered, and I'll quote the scripture. So if you're familiar with the Bible, you'll be like, oh, she's quoting the Bible. But if you're not familiar with the Bible, you'll just be like, oh, John said this thing. So and people get upset about it. So that's an interesting, I've had people come to me saying, hey, you need to put the chapter in the verse, and I'm like, I don't think I do. I don't think that helps anybody or the thought or the story or the flow of the way that so I can kind of see these like authors and writers of these stories being outraged by like their stories being like piecemealed out. And then at the same time, I see the strength of being able to use it as a resource, but it does interrupt the flow. And also I think this is interesting too, like for God so loved the world, like that's not the only that's set in a context.
Yeah. And isn't it?
Right.
Again,
and like the context is like the story of Moses and the serpent and the wilderness, and like people were dying of a disease and needed to look somewhere, and so they had to look at the thing that was killing them, and that same way, and so
and the line afterwards is, for God didn't want to condemn the world but wanted to save it, right? Like don't pass it out, like it's part of the story.
So in some ways it's like it's both a blessing and a curse, isn't it? It's a blessing in terms of reference and study, and then it's a curse in terms of context, and then I guess this is and like bigger, broader story and emphasis and what we're reading into versus what we're discovering, which is where we're headed.
Yeah, and as you say, I think the thing is, for some people, this is obviously incredibly helpful, and that's good, and we celebrate it. But it does show us that there's more than one way to do this. that just because this has been happening for a while now and this is the default, it's not the only way that the church has operated. And so much of the wisdom that we have about our faith came from the first 1200 years of Christianity. Of course it did. And those people weren't playing with chapters and verses, but with the story as a whole, or whatever scroll or fragments they could get their hands on. So
And also to reiterate, chapter titles are not scripture.
oh, we're getting there, Danielle. Don't you
Okay.
worry. We're not,
Okay.
so
Good.
we're
Keep going. I'm learning so much, James. Thank you.
Let me bring you to the 1600s, where Robert
Yes.
Estienne, the French printer, introduces things that would blow our minds and keep, I don't know, printers of bumper stickers in business for a long while as well, and add verse numbers to our Bible. Do you know how and why he did this?
No
Yeah,
idea.
sorry, it's a rhetorical question, and to our listeners. So basically, how he did it was he was on horseback and just decided that it would be easier for people to read if he added verses. And in theory, they were supposed to be of equal length, but of course some aren't. And the kind of the story is that the reason why some are really long is like his horse jolted and he just missed a couple of lines, and like we don't know. And so even that thing,
That is interesting because I often wonder, like, why aren't they the end of sentences?
Yeah. There's no, again, like to say there is now, we trust that God is at work in this process because God loves us.
In spite
and
of
is
the
desperately
numbers.
involved, in spite of the numbers. But if you do sometimes read, like, why is that at the beginning of that? Well, it's because, you know why? Because he was a printer and he wanted to print Bibles, and he said, hey, this is my unique selling point. Your
Wow.
other Bibles, they don't have verses in them. Mine do. So if you really want to remember John 3:16, you can now
Wow.
like do that because it exists because of this French printer who wanted to sell Bibles, and good for him. But it's all because but that's why they're
Well,
cut
this
up
is
the
a
way
whole
they are.
thing because I think that newer editions of the Message put the verses in because people were
Yep.
mad about
Yeah,
it.
they did. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Because people because it's not a Bible otherwise. And I think it's fascinating that it's just a guy on a horse who wanted to sell Bibles. That's why we have verses. Now, I believe that God is at work on all these things. Of course I do. God is redeeming all things because I think God does. But like to pretend that these are some like beautiful protected holy thing, or even there was a big like council that all the Christian leaders around the world got together and went, oh well, this should certainly be a verse and this should be 2 verses and stuff. It was just a guy on a horse. Like that's where it came from.
Well, and that's a conversation about like what books made it in the Bible and like the canon of scripture. Like that's all happened with the council and all that kind of with theologians and all that kind of stuff. But like the actual format
Once it was
is
set,
just
yeah.
literally a pragmatic,
Yeah.
decision by one guy that obviously he was right. It took off.
Yeah. I mean, like, wow, what a and it's interesting.
What an
so-
invention.
Yeah,
Holy.
good for him. And it's surely, and of course, because as you say, people were really hesitant to add anything to the Bible. So there's always this like bit of a pushback.
Except
like,
Martin Luther, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
He added blatantly a word and
li-
took
like
some
hacked
others
some
out.
bits out of tried to,
Yeah.
I think. So it's really interesting to me that because there is this like, oh, we can't add anything, and like, well, this doesn't really count as adding anything. But once you get to those kind of subheadings, then you really are making decisions, and it's actually only a few decades after the introduction of verses that we start seeing that. But they're often like super hilariously reductive. So one of my favorite examples of this is the Geneva Bible, which is quite famous for having those subheadings quite early, but they're really non-descriptive about it. So for example, when Jesus feeds the 5,000, their subheading is of the 5 loaves, etc. Like the most understated way to describe.
So the numbers
this
came before the
miracle.
chapter headings then. So the numbers came
Yes,
before the
yes,
segments.
they did.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
So
yeah.
first it's let's finish the sentences, like so
Yep.
that we know it's not in the middle of a word.
Yep.
And then it's add the numbers.
Yeah,
And then or the chapters have already been in.
yeah. And then add,
And then it's
add
the
small numbers,
headings.
and then add headings.
Which
yeah.
the headings are not just chapters, they're like all through the chapters.
wherever you want them to be, and that's the issue.
wild, James.
It's
That's
wherever
wild.
you want them to be, man.
And just whoever, so
Yeah.
who made those up?
whoever
Who makes
was,
those up? Like the Bible translation?
yeah, basically, my understanding is the Bible translation team will be involved in it, but I will.
Have you compared the translations in terms of the chapter headings at all?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, but what's funny is so many of them are so standardized now.
Yeah.
Like it is
Wow.
interesting that like it's become quite homogenous, which is why yeah, reading so I quite like the Voice Bible. It's kind of a weird one. It was done by like
No, my
poets
husband
as
likes
well
it too.
yeah, I bet he
Yeah.
does. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because they just tried to do things a little bit differently and had it wasn't just biblical scholars on the translation team, because can a biblical scholar accurately translate a poem?
Right.
It's really and on one level, yes, they can word for word translate something, but what is the heart of that? And so this is why these subheadings are very much at the so you have headings at times that are like women submit to husbands, which isn't necessarily reflective of what the text says, because of course people people aren't
They come with their
unbiased.
stuff.
Yeah, they
That's
come
right.
with their stuff. And we do too, right? Like if we were doing this project ourselves, it would how would we put that subheading there? It's like
I feel like this would just be a fun exercise for like a Bible study one day. So just free ideas here,
Yeah,
people.
yeah.
But like just to like retitle all the chapter headings, like
Yeah.
or take out the ones you don't think should be there, or like just have a think through that. Like and just the idea that even just that is so shocking. I mean, we just look at things at their face value. We don't really think through how did this happen? And I feel like so many things that are pragmatic decisions, we don't think through the theological ramifications of that in every way, like in our lives, businesses, and the way we print the Bible. Like it just, we're not thinking through, oh, this is a pragmatic decision. Maybe it puts things in bite size so it helps people, read but it actually also really frames the way that people read and then emphasizes the things that the chapter title people are wanting to emphasize it's fascinating.
And they steer you in a direction that is
Yeah,
and
of
they're
course.
supposed to. This is the thing that even we'll say with the best will in the world that even if someone doesn't think they're doing this deliberately, they are putting what they understand to be the important part of that text front and center. And again, and not to get too into this, who do you think has been translating Bibles, Danielle? Do you think it has been marginalized people from the majority world, or do you think we'll link this in the show notes and everything?
Do you think it's the people who actually wrote, like people who represent the people who actually wrote the Bible? Like,
No,
or do you think
there's
it's people who, yeah, that's right. So that's fascinating too, right? Because the person that's putting the emphasis on what the story is trying to tell you is not even from the same
Yep.
people group or perspective of the people who wrote the original text. It's really this is bringing to mind one of my pet peeve ones is about the Abraham and Isaac story. And the chapter heading is always Abraham's test of faith. And I'm always like, this is so bizarre because I feel like the story climaxes. Like if you actually just read the story, it climaxes when God stops him from sacrificing his son and says, I don't want, he literally is like, I'm not that kind of God.
Yeah.
And that's the literal parable. Like that's the story is like, oh, Yahweh is not like Molech. Yahweh is
Yeah.
not like these other tribal gods that require sacrifice and want the. And so I feel like it's like the person whoever wrote that chapter title didn't get the point of the story. Because I'm like, it really isn't about testing Abraham. That chapter title should be Abraham's discovery of a God who doesn't kill. Like that should be that should like it's like
Abraham
what
is not the most interesting character in this story with Abraham and God. Like that's not the most...
right, but we make it about Abraham
Yeah,
instead
yeah.
of making it about the revelation of Yahweh to this guy who doesn't understand God, a God who doesn't demand, a firstborn son. So I just feel like that's like one of my pet peeves because I feel like that really, really, if you miss that, you kind of miss a lot.
And again,
Which is why when you get back to like, we've had this conversation on this podcast before, but when you get to this like substitutional penal atonement theory and stuff, like, of course you think that God is sacrificing Jesus
Yeah.
with intention, because that's what you think
Yeah.
that's what you think God required Abraham to do, you know? And so you're linking these things, but I'm like, but if you could have maybe saw the revelation and the mind-blowing truth that that's not what God wanted and what God is like, you maybe wouldn't have fallen so easily into this kind of trap of seeing God through a lens of vengeance and wrath.
And you think of all the times that people who have really struggled have been said, well, God likes to test people. And they're like, no, no, no. God likes to
Right.
reveal their radical love to us. That's what God likes to do. And again, this story does this. And hey, does it do it in a weird way? Sure. Things were weird 3,000 years ago. I'm not going to pretend
Yeah.
I understand all the nuances of it. But
Right.
if the point of that story is these other gods make demands of you that I will not make, and they expect you to hurt yourself and hurt the people you love in the ways that I will not. Well, that's a very, again, if that the subheading of that is like, God will never demand that you harm your child. Imagine
Right.
that. Imagine that subheading.
Or
There you
sacrifice
go.
your
Like-
child. Like, and this, James, like, I hear this all the time, like, even still in missionary language, or people who are like really devoted to God, they're just like, well, we have to sacrifice everything. We got to sacrifice our kids. And I'm like, no, the whole point of the story is that you don't. Like, that's the point of the story, is God does not want this, require it. He wants to prevent it. So I just want to like tear my hair out half the time, because I feel like we didn't even get that first story. That's a pretty early
It's
story.
really early.
That's like really soon. And even Abraham's like, this is wild, because I can't imagine this being the case. But anyway, that's an example of like, we're looking now for Abraham's test of faith instead of for Yahweh's beautiful revelation.
Yeah, God's
And so like,
revelation
that's
of
an
love of
example of how we're steered through these chapter titles in ways that maybe we're not even aware that we're being formed that way. And I'm sure people that wrote them maybe weren't intending to form people that way. I don't know.
We
Who knows?
get to be as generous as we want to be. And as you say, I'm certain there's a lot of people out there who are acting with authenticity and integrity. But even at their best, they are still only being able to share from their own experiences. I share this all the time. We'll share it in the show notes. But my favorite picture that whenever I talk about Bible and translation is a picture of the translators of the NIV, which is the version that we have in the pews at church because they've been there for 40 years or whatever. And it's 12 identical white guys. It's like hilarious, and they like look the same and they dress the same, and it's just
they're all
hilarious.
wearing practically the same
Yeah,
suit.
all the
It's
same.
almost like they're in an evangelical uniform.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, I wonder why this dynamic group of individuals didn't have like the most sympathetic translation towards women. Like
Yeah. Or anybody else.
just the whitest, oldest men, and God bless, and I'll probably be one day. But it just shows us like, yeah, maybe those folks are going to have a certain lens, and of course they're going to have probably consensus as well, because it's easy to build consensus to people that are identical to you.
And then I think like there is the translation problems where even stuff like in the Greek, there is no, he, she, there's like a word that means basically them, but in English there isn't. So then they had to pick a pronoun, and they picked he, of course, because they're all hymns.
yeah.
So even that, and then that became the Bible. Like, so then people go like, well, you're like, so people will, the story is of like one of those guys on the NIV when he was doing devotions, like Bible study around his family's dinner table, and his daughter basically pushed back a little bit, saying like, well, that doesn't even apply to me. You just said brothers.
Yep.
And her dad was like, no, but it means you two. Like, he's
Yeah.
like one of the, and she goes, well, then why doesn't it say that? And then he went back to the translation team and said, hey, look, this is crazy. Like, my daughter, like, what? He's like,
Yeah.
ta-da, but it also doesn't say that. Like, it's not like we're saying, oh no, he means it. It means the original text actually does say it in a way that is
Yeah.
inclusive. And so they changed it. And that's when they came out with the
It's the
NIRV,
TNIV, the today's New
or yeah.
International. Yeah.
And then it just, as soon as they came out with that, it was like they had messed with the Bible.
Yeah.
And it was, the pushback was unbelievable. Like, they were demanding the guy's job, and like this guy went all crazy. And he's just like, guys, this is what the Bible actually says. I didn't change anything. So it's just a fascinating, like, now this thing that we've done. And I wonder even about chapter titles. Like, again, Eugene Peterson, the pushback was put the numbers in. Like, we can't, this isn't the Bible unless it looks like that. And so this isn't even I feel like this is fascinating because this is even a conversation about like translation specifics and how sameness affects the way we even translate original manuscripts. But this is just like, this is in addition to, this isn't even the sacred scriptures. This isn't even thus saith the Lord. This isn't even, this is just people inserting what they want willy-nilly as they like,
Yeah.
including the numbers because of a horse. Like, that's wild.
Isn't that the best?
But that does help explain some things because I literally am like, whoever did these numbers wasn't really thinking it through. But also, isn't that hilarious that now we can't change it?
And now, yeah, that's it again. It's like, oh no, it's John 3:14 now. Like, no one's going with that. Like, we've already got our bumper stickers. We're not going back.
Wow,
like
that's amazing that we're locked in now.
Because
we're locked in because that French guy had an idea for printing.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I wonder how many other things we're locked into, James, that we just think is.
And we just assume because it's like that, it's always been that way. And again, development is good, and some of the, some of those pieces are really helpful for people as well. So we don't want to just trash everything. But it is interesting that we think.
No, for me, I like the numbers. It is random, and it is weird. I've always wondered, why did they put the number in the middle of the sentence? Like, that's weird because now I have to say 13B.
Yeah.
At the start of the next sentence.
Robert Estienne had a bumpy road sometimes, and billions of Christians afterwards are just dealing with that.
So one time my son and I were watching TED Talks. I think it was like COVID, so we were desperate. And this guy comes on in the TED Talks. He comes on. He goes, "I just can't take it anymore. I can't take it anymore." And he puts up his shoe on a stool, and he basically is like, "You're all doing it wrong." And then he showed us how we're tying our shoes. And then he's like, "Do you not notice your shoes are coming untied all the time? Like, do you not know that double knots are not supposed to be a thing in our lives?" Like, and then he just showed us how to do it right. He just showed us, like, if you just loop it to the left instead of to the right, like the way we've traditionally been told, your shoelaces should be horizontal to your shoe and they shouldn't come undone.
Oh.
And that was it. And then he stomped and he's like, "Thank you." And he just stomped off. That was the whole TED Talk. It was hilarious. People should look it up. It's very funny. And my son and I were like, "No, that can't be
true.
Like, that can't be true, And so we literally go and get our shoes and put them on. And we're like, this is true. And so after that, I was like, I kept trying to retrain my brain to do it a different way.
Yeah.
But we just went down this rabbit trail together. Like, I wonder what else I'm wrong about. Like, I wonder what else I've inherited that I wasn't aware of. Like, I wonder what else, in all good intention and all right, all the right reasons and right ways. I wonder how many things I've taught my kids, that aren't, like, I taught all my kids to tie their shoes up the wrong way. I just didn't know, and so it was this beautiful, and it's an easy topic, tying your shoe, because nobody's going to be like, well, I've got guilt about that now, that's just like, it is what it is. But a couple things about it, like, one, it just opened up this possibility that, like, oh, there are ways that we've assumed and ways that we've done and ways that we've inherited. And I feel like even stuff about the Bible, there's a lot about this. Yeah. Like, we just think, like, thus saith the Lord about the numbers, and we think thus saith the Lord about the chapter titles, and we think thus saith the, And actually, the Bible is constantly an invitation for us to discover and to grow and to learn more things and to be rebuked and to be confused and to be disrupted and to stay open, to discovery and what the Spirit of God might be saying in these days. And this conversation, I think this series is going to be really fun to explore some of that stuff. And you and I often, we end up talking to people on this podcast, and we've talked about this, which is why we're doing this. And one of the things that we love to do the most is talk about the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, this is kind of how our relationship began, was like with like, do you want to talk about this text that I have to talk on? And then you became a research pastor for me for a little while. And we just would nerd out on Bible texts and exegesis and stuff. And it was really fun. And we were just like, well, why don't we just do that again? That's fun.
Yeah. This is my favorite thing to do.
And maybe people might enjoy it. So we recommend, if you're a preacher and you're looking for a series, we recommend AKA. This could be your new series. Go ahead, take this podcast, make it your research, do your own, whatever. But this is the intro. The chapter titles, I hate to break it to you, everybody, they're made up. The numbers, horse guy.
Just horse guy, Robert Estienne.
And so we're going to pick some of our favorites stories, and we're going to retitle them and tell you why all throughout this podcast. And we're going to do that a few times. And the AKA series will be a discovery of what could be, and maybe even an invitation for you to do your own retitling and rechaptering and renumbering even. I mean, I dare you.
It's always, yeah, it's always an invitation, right? To like what helps us more deeply and creatively think about God and what God has for us. And the reality is that even the best people with the best of intentions are still limited. They're still people. So that's okay. So we get to say thank you for the work, and we're gonna take over for a moment, and we're gonna see what God does in this space.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm looking forward to this series, James.
Right. Me too.